In the photographs we see of the Hasselblad lunar camera with a lens on it, what we see on the front of that is a filter. It's a polarizing filter. They explain why they use it, because of the angle of the sun. Now, the point of a polarizing filter is that you have to be able to have a viewfinder to see when you turn the polarizing filter, you will see it affecting the light coming into the camera, and it will reduce unwanted reflections, various other things, but you have to be able to see it through your viewfinder. If you haven't got a viewfinder, you can't use a polarizing filter. So why did they put one on the camera? Why did they say they used it? They didn't use it. A polarizing filter has to be seen through a viewfinder. You, as the operator, have to be able to determine the correct angle that the polarizing filter is turned to reduce the reflections you don't want. It's very simple. Anybody who's used one will understand that. It's not rocket science, as I keep saying. It's just standard optics. And if you don't appreciate that, you cannot then criticize anything we say about the use of the cameras. We know what we're talking about. And if NASA have faked the photographs, probably at Cannon Air Force Base or at Hangar 1 at Menlo Park or Arizona or wherever they did it, Hawaii possibly, because the hills there look remarkably similar to the ones on the moon. If you can demonstrate, NASA, we're talking to you now, if you can demonstrate that you took these photographs on the lunar surface, please tell us how you did it and what equipment you used. And if you don't tell us how you did it, we have to assume what we say is correct, that you faked it. Prove you didn't, because we can prove you did. So NASA, you've really got a problem now. Your credibility is being shot to pieces. Artemis is not stacking up. You've only launched one Artemis. You're supposed to be launching another one. It's going to take you 2 years between the previous one and the new one. Artemis 2 is in December next year. Why is it taking 2 years to get a silly rocket off the ground? Oh, you destroyed the launch site. Oh, well, build it up again. Doesn't take very long. On Apollo, they launched every 6 months, and they were bigger rockets, more powerful rockets.
Yeah, and they didn't destroy the launch pad when they took off either.
No, they didn't, because they had flame deflectors underneath the rocket, and you forgot about that. Oh, dear.
That plus water suppression. Even Musk did not have water suppression on that when he was doing it. They've added it since.
Well, fortunately, he had water suppression when he fired those lumps of concrete off into the ocean, half a mile from the launch site, lumps of concrete falling into the ocean, hitting cars.
Now he's waiting for FAA approval to launch, I guess.
Yes, he is.
Well,
yeah.
Who the hell is qualified to decide whether in the FAA, whether his equipment is qualified to launch? The only thing that they can guarantee is that the unexpected rapid disassembly of equipment works flawlessly. That's just the amazing part. Oh, we need FAA certification. It's just another delay. It's an excuse.
Yeah, I think we're going to see delays on Artemis as well. When the astronauts realize the dangers they're going to be placed in, going out into deep space, beyond the Earth's magnetic field protection, when they realize what that might do to them as human beings, they might need a little bit more protection, a little bit more training. And where is the anti-radiation protection in the spacesuits? They all look very pretty. They're all designed by film set designers, so they look the part. But do they do the part? Do they protect the astronauts from the vacuum, from the heat, from the radiation? That's all they've got to work on. They've known about it for years.
Well, I think the biggest problem they have with the suits is trying to keep them cool on a set. Like they're going to put these guys in these suits, they're going to overheat pretty good on a set.
Yeah.
I mean, no problem with the air, because they can just get a little air pump in the backpack and just blow some outside air inside on the set and blow it down to keep it. But can they keep it cool enough in that? with all the lighting and all their special effects. And
here's something interesting. Hasselblad. Some Hasselblad lenses feature an overfocus position, allowing their user to turn the lens past the infinity mark. However, this distance may in fact be so minuscule that you cannot visually see it on the lens barrel marking. Hasselblad does this to ensure sharp focus when the lens is subject to thermal expansion. Interestingly, Hasselblad currently features a special lens for aerial photography that is fixed at an infinity focus position, and the company has been developing cameras for NASA, including the camera and Zeiss lenses used on the moon that are subject to 300 degrees centigrade temperature swing between the sun and shade, possibly the greatest thermal challenge in the photography world, with designated infinity settings. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
wouldn't that mess up the gears and everything else in there and the shutters?
Yeah, everything's mounted inside of that lens.
If they're talking about that kind of stuff and that expansion on there, that's just going to jam everything up. They're such a precise machine.
Why would you have a Hasselblad camera, the lens that goes beyond infinity for the focus, when you cannot see it? There's no viewfinder.
The bullshit that NASA puts out goes beyond infinity. That's why they have the setting on the camera to match NASA's BS. It's beyond infinity.
Beyond sensible belief. It looks like NASA have been caught out, have been exposed for what they've attempted. They've attempted to fool the world that they landed humans on the lunar surface. That's their story, and they're sticking to it. Because if they don't stick to it, if they say, well, I'm sorry, guys, back in the 60s, a very different world. We had a Cold War going on. We had a space race. We had to demonstrate to the world that we were the superior technological power on the planet. And we did it very well. We landed humans on the moon. That was our story. And you all believed it because you had no reason not to. That is what's so sad about this. Now, if you, as NASA or the US government, say, okay, sorry guys, we did fool the world. We had a brilliantly executed propaganda exercise. That was all our work. We were doing that. We've made the world a safer place. Oh, believe that, you believe anything.
Yeah, but the thing is they try to discredit it because they call us conspiracy theorists. We simply deal in facts.
We are conspiracy theorists.
This isn't a conspiracy.
No.
This is a factual thing that it actually never happened. People need to understand that. They keep trying to throw it off like we're a bunch of idiots, we're hoaxsters, we're doing whatever, right? The evidence is there, and we have repeated so many new findings, and NASA is providing it for us every time they put out something new today, because it directly contradicts their previous documents, their previous statements, and their previous photographs that you're looking at. It's a factual thing. We have much difficulty getting anything off the ground. I mean, you have to have a launch pad, but then you have another problem putting humans on board. You don't see Musk putting humans on board because his equipment just disintegrates. Those are the facts today.
But first we were talking about the N1 rocket. And here we are back to doing the same thing again. It didn't work back then. It is not going to work today. I don't care what technology you have on there because of that vibration. How are you going to get rid of that pogo effect on those motors, especially when you have multiple engines on there? It's just going to keep making matters worse. But as far as the blast went from the N1 engine, I believe that in that one article there, it was a mile away and people were still catching fire like matchsticks. And then we come to this article here that we looked at yesterday.
We were looking at an article and it was talking about the fact that everything was so overly complicated that it's making it impossible to make any progress because our technology is so overcomplicated that we can't overcome the problems. Our new technology is stopping us from achieving anything because it's just simply too overcomplicated. That's what the article was about. That's one of the best excuses I've ever seen in my life. We could do it, but we overcomplicated it. So now we can't do it. Like, just go back to, just light the rocket and go, put a couple of guys in it, cheap suits on and go. But now it's so overly complicated, it doesn't work anymore. Well, that's not solving a problem. That's creating more problems. But now they're just creating the next level of excuse. Everything is just to the next level.
Maybe they've decided to look at what worked on Apollo and found that nothing worked on Apollo.
We looked at that.
Yeah, we did.
And we know it didn't work. They just refused to accept that.
Because nobody at NASA now worked at NASA during Apollo. So they're all coming to it fresh. They're all coming to it believing it worked. And they say, well, let's check it out. Let's have a look at the schematics. Let's have a look at the blueprints. Let's have a look at all the records. Now, where are those records? I'm not quite sure. Okay, well, there must be something online about it. So they look online and found that there's nothing there. So did Apollo really happen? No, it didn't.
Modern spacecraft are far more complex now, which both drives up the cost of development and testing, but also the risk of overlooking something, said McDonald. In the 60s and 70s, we simply didn't understand the risks we were taking. Today, we have a better handle on those, but to overcome them, we add complexity to the solution. But complexity makes it easier to miss a mistake and for anomalies to occur, said Malcolm MacDonald, a professor of spacecraft engineering at Strathclyde University, Scotland. Well, no kidding, Sherlock.
Yes, they are overcomplicating it.
He's the one that's saying it's so complicated we can't figure it out.
Yeah.
I like another thing that he said. He says, that's why we test rockets before we put people in them. We've learned from disasters such as the fire that broke out in the cabin of NASA's Apollo 1 moon mission in 1967. Well, yeah. Well, even look at what they were doing. I mean, come on. They had 7 accidents with oxygen fires, the last one being those rabbits that were bouncing around all over each other, and the static electricity from the fur caught the oxygen and poof, off the whole thing went. That was the 7th one, and yet the 8th one, they put people in.
They put humans in it and stuck them 200 feet in the air. Why they stuck them 200 feet in the air, I'll never know.
So they couldn't put the fire out.
Like, if you're going to test the capsule, it can sit on the ground. It doesn't need to be 200 feet in the air. And a Saturn V rocket is 363 feet in the air, so it wasn't on top of the rocket. They simply put it up 200 feet.
So nobody could see it catch fire until it was too late.
So they didn't have any fire equipment with them or anything else. That's the most unusual part of the test, is the location, where they located it. And it's the only test they did at 200 feet in the air. All the other pure oxygen tests, they were done on the ground or in laboratories or whatever, right? The one with the rabbits, so that the static electricity off the charges, because it's in a pure oxygen, there's no moisture, right? And the static electricity off the rabbits, the explosion, right? But when you kill the things 7 times in a row, animals, birds, whatever the hell, dogs that they put in there, right? And you have a failure 7 times in a row, you don't put humans inside for the next test. Especially when you know how long it's going to take to kill them because they're in their suits, and why it would take 20 minutes to open the door.
Yeah, and what did happen to Thomas Barron's 500-page report after that event? He was the safety officer.
I can't find it. I tried to find it for part 1 of Raz's show. All I found was the same blinking video that everybody else has, except I found a nice clean version of it, and that's all you get.
I found a video. I've never seen this before. This guy's sitting right on the fence, but he's got Joe Rogan on there and Bart, yourself, Tyson. At least you're in good company.
That's true. DB Business, they're quite good. They've produced a few things.
This is the first time I've seen this particular video. The one thing that I wanted to comment on that particular video is the amount of time that Musk has been working on his rocket technology. And considering that the moon landings were real and successful, and he's had 3 times the amount of time to produce whatever with technology that already exists and was successful, how come he's not going anywhere?
Good point. Yep.
Why would you continue to fund an operation? Why would you continue to fund Elon Musk when he hasn't accomplished anything? Why would you not continue just to fund NASA?
Because NASA have abrogated their responsibility for spaceflight to people like Elon Musk.
That's a pretty good excuse, isn't it?
Yeah, means they don't have to answer it.
They don't have to answer it. He's coming up near 20 years he's been working on this, which is a hell of a lot longer than NASA had. And 50 years later, the technology that we've got, it should just be able to go to Walmart and buy all the stuff you need. And of course, there was one serious mistake that he made in there when he was talking about the accomplishments of the technology, the development of the technology. Their computer systems disappeared completely. Anything they were developing as a computerized system was completely taken over by both IBM, Apple, and Microsoft, right? All of their technology that they were using as far as their guidance systems that they developed, all of that computerized stuff that they say that works so well completely disappeared. It's been reinvented and so-called restored so that they can use it in simulators in their museums and stuff like that. But it's not going anywhere else, and they're probably using some very simple computers that they just stick in behind, because a little tiny chip, you'd never see it when you got 10,000 tons of equipment sitting on the floor. It's interesting that, well, first of all, you're famous. And the second thing that I saw in the video that was good is he gave you a really good plug for Nexus magazine. That's a great bonus. I mean, you should make a comment under the video. Thanks for the promo.
I might just do that. Makes sense.
Other than the fact that they really didn't get into any real details on any of the stuff, and there was a nice overview. It kind of left Joe Rogan right on the fence, didn't it?
Did rather, yes. I mean, he was fairly vocal about the fact that he didn't consider they'd happened. He changed his mind, I think, after he'd been interviewed by Tyson and a few other people.
They took him for a tour of NASA.
Yes, like that, was that football player who said initially that he didn't think the moon landings were real, and NASA took him under their wing and gave him a full tour of their facility. Then he comes out and says, oh, yeah, I think they did it. It's called pressure. But nobody's taken me on a tour of NASA's facilities to convince me. But it's interesting how they continually make the point that it would be harder to fake it than to do it for real. And that has not been proven, because the things that we say about the Apollo missions, I think should be certainly taken on board and certainly understood. We've never claimed that the launch was faked. The launch of the rocket was for real until it disappeared from sight 2 minutes after launch. And then we have only the word of NASA that what happened next was what they reported as being real. Now, it's perfectly possible to create a simulation of the spacecraft. If they wanted to do it, they could create the simulation. They could write the script for an 8-day mission or a 12-day mission in the case of Apollo 17. That's not difficult. It's perfectly possible to do it. And all we say is, well, let's prove that it was real. And it's very hard to prove it was real. It's much easier to prove it was faked, because there are so many options available to the people involved. If it was known back in 1962 that getting humans, not rockets, not unmanned craft, but humans onto the lunar surface, and just as importantly back to Earth, was going to be impossible within the timescale set by President Kennedy by the end of the decade, 1969. So that, because he was subsequently assassinated, his challenge had to be accepted, and it was accepted. There's no doubt that the 400,000 engineers, support staff, cafeteria staff, all the people who were told worked on the Apollo program, did the job that they were doing. There's no doubt about that. The idea that 400,000 people somehow knew about a fake is such a ridiculous idea. What, did NASA send a memo around saying, don't tell anybody, guys, but we're going to fake this? Of course they didn't. They ensured that those engineers and scientists and rocket scientists and all the other people involved were doing the best job they could. They were building the best rockets, the best control centers, the best rovers, the best spacesuits, given that they didn't know the conditions they were going to be operating under. And the point you've made often, Scott, is that the idea that has been put forward is that these things were all tested under the conditions that we're told operate on the moon. No, they weren't, because nobody had been to the moon, so they couldn't test them under those conditions. Then we introduced the concept of the vacuum of space and the effect that has on materials. And there's no testing that I think you've discovered or anybody's discovered of vacuum testing under the same level that they would experience on the lunar surface. We know what happens to photographic film under those vacuum conditions. The color balance is shot, and at worst it's destroyed.
And
So,
of course, that's at a very low vacuum.
yeah,
That's barely at the edge of space is the best we could do with testing, right?
yeah. And nobody's challenged it. Nobody's challenged the fact that the testing that you and Robert did with the vacuum chamber was in any way invalid. They may have criticized the result, but they couldn't criticize the fact that the vacuum chamber was for real. You showed pictures of it. You showed it as it was going on. That's the way science works. Now, if you can get a vacuum chamber measuring torr 10 to the minus 12 as a minimum and put a photographic film in it and see what effect it has, that in itself will destroy the whole Apollo narrative, will destroy the narrative of man landing on the moon, taking 5,771 photographs on the lunar surface by the 12 named astronauts. No, that never happened. It couldn't happen for reasons that we're beginning to fully understand now. So these people who come around and say, oh, it's much harder to fake it than it would be to go for real. No, that's a ridiculous statement to make, because you have to show what is required to go to the moon with humans, land them on the surface of the moon, and then the humans have to return to Earth. It was a wonderful story, totally plausible. Nobody died. So if you like, a sort of a victimless conspiracy. They couldn't have people dying at any stage of the Apollo moon landings, because otherwise the whole thing would have been questioned. So the idea that these eminent people like Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, of course Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are going to say that they landed on the moon, because that's what they were supposed to have done. Of course Elon Musk is going to say, oh, we're going to land on the moon. It's noticeable that none of his rockets have yet left Earth orbit.
That was my point, is why would you continue to fund somebody who obviously has the best available technology and working with NASA can refer to their successful technology, and he spent 20 years at it and still doesn't have a result? Why would you continue to fund somebody like that?
Trevor has just republished his book with me about the faking of the moon landings. He's added some further information. It's now on sale, so if anybody's looking at it, The Apollo Moon Hoax, The Real Evidence by Trevor Weaver and Marcus Allen, available now on Amazon. If you order it through Nexus Magazine, you'll receive a signed copy, signed by me. Ha! If it's worth anything. You're not charged any more for that. That's a free service we offer.
Imagine that, getting a famous person to sign it for free.
Who's been mentioned in the same program as Bart Sibrel, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Joe Rogan, Neil Armstrong, and Elon Musk. I mean, how high can you get, guys? Oh dear, oh dear. Nothing to do with me, that. Somebody else put it all together. But I'm glad they did. It produces a little bit of publicity and a little bit of... And thanks, guys, for the promotion of Nexus Magazine, of which I'm the UK publisher. The editor's Duncan Rhodes, who lives in Australia.
We were looking at Anaglyphs is what we were looking at. So he's got 2378 and 2379 on magazine 134 there. Robert's going to show you how the Anaglyph photographs are done.
So let's go ahead and pick some of these different images we can make. First, we can do side by side. We can do side by side right, side by side left, over and under. That's left, top, right. You know, same thing here, but we can make Anaglyph images. Now, do you want to have a red or cyan or red? Depends which lens you have in your little 3D glasses. So, for the fun of it, let's just make cyan and red. And then we're going to hit create, and it's going to render it. Oh, look at that, done already. Oh, that was fast. Okay, and we're going to drag it in there. And there we go. Now you have an Anaglyph photo here. Just like that, I just made a 3D photo out of a single frame photograph.
Yeah, and it looks just like what NASA has put up on their website now.
And the Nikons didn't have
Reticules. And that's the first thing when I went out to the NASA website and started looking at their Anaglyphs now. First thing I saw was the reticules. I'm going, what are they doing? Holding two cameras side by side and taking a picture? No, this is how they produce them.
There's your Anaglyph. There's your original. Just like that. Bang, done.
Yep. Did they have access to this software?
I don't know when they put them up, but they're recent.
Okay.
Because I've been all through their site. I mean, when they change stuff and I go to one of my previous links, it comes up and it says, 404 error, right? I just Googled the Anaglyph on it and now it's listed on the site.
Ah, okay.
They're adding the text to it. They're giving descriptions underneath the photographs when you're looking at them now. Jack hands the camera off to Cernan. That wasn't there before. None of those comments were there. Those are acting instructions, by the way.
Yeah.
They might as well just put the EO in there like they did on the cue cards for the enthusiastic observations, right? Well, they're now adding the enthusiastic observations.
NASA are getting very worried that enough people with enough technical knowledge, like Robert has, can look at these pictures and explain how they were created. That is denying NASA's narrative. But NASA are getting very upset about it. Hence, they keep coming back with additional information, and we keep coming back with additional explanations. So, running to stand still, I think you call NASA at this point.
The average person wouldn't know that their stereoscopic camera was designed specifically just for close-ups on the ground. It's on an entire frame sitting that is pointing at the ground. And they would also not know that there's no reticules on those Nikon cameras.
No need for it.
They wouldn't even know that were Nikon cameras.
So there's your Anaglyphs right there. There is one they made, and here's one I made.
Yeah, have you ever seen that Anaglyph before of the famous Earthrise?
That's very well done, Robert. Well done.
The one on the right is NASA's Earthrise Anaglyph, and I pulled that off of just, like I said, I Googled it and started looking through there.
It's because it's such a famous image, so well known. The blue marble, the Earthrise picture, that was Apollo 10. Anders, I think, is credited with taking the Earthrise picture. And because it's such a famous picture, or so well known, I mean, Earthrise is a great phrase to use to explain it, because that's really what it is. The Earth is rising above the lunar horizon. So NASA are going fairly strong on people's understanding of what the pictures show, which is fine. It's supposed to be the photograph which started the whole environmental movement, because there's this fragile little pale blue dot floating in the black velvet of space, and we've got to look after it, which is fine. That's understandable. That's what we should be doing anyway.
In fact, the only thing that is true is we are a fragile little ball of dust floating in the vastness of space. Yeah. And we're insignificant in every respect.
Very insignificant.
The Earth just needs to have a little hiccup and we're gone. It just needs to move those tectonic plates a little bit sideways.
Well, if they would stop siphoning all the oil out, maybe those tectonic plates would have something to move on instead of to lubricate themselves.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil, I guess.
What was that George Carlin quote? Humanity is here on Earth, and it will only take the Earth to shrug like we've got a bad case of fleas. We're hit.
Yeah, just a hiccup. We're gone. We're gone. We're gone. We're gone. We're gone.